What the hell is going on with Prigozhin, Wagner, and the Russian Ministry of Defense? I have to say, I'm a little torn on this. For those of you who don't know, this is big breaking news. Today, the Wagner Private Military Corporation, band of mercenaries, known the world over, is accusing the Russian Ministry of Defense of bombing one of their military encampments in Ukraine. So this is an accusation of Ruski on Ruski violence. It is, depending on how you want to interpret it, it could be the beginning of a Russian civil war. That is, if we want to believe what Prigozhin is alleging. Now, I don't find Prigozhin to be necessarily the most trustworthy character, but let's just hear him out. Let's just go over what he's saying and take him at face value to begin with. So as I said, he's claiming that the Russian Ministry of Defense bombed his soldiers, killed his people. This is after just a month or two ago, I think it was, that he made this big video standing over a pile of bodies and saying how, look at all these dead men on the ground. This is all because of the Russian Ministry of Defense. I can't work with them anymore. They are causing us to lose this war. They're a bunch of traitors. And so we have on the record Prigozhin butting heads very, very seriously and very openly with the Russian Ministry of Defense. And so he has vowed revenge for his fallen soldiers who were killed in this airstrike. And he says that he will not stop until there is a regime change at the Ministry of Defense. He's going to launch a coup to overthrow, presumably, Shoigu, the Minister of Defense, and perhaps install himself as defense minister. I don't know. From what I understand, reading a translation, and I will post an article from Zero Hedge going over all this news. From what I understand from the translator, it would seem that Prigozhin is not launching a coup against the whole of the Russian government, just against the Ministry of Defense. That's what he's claiming. And he says he's going to take 25,000 troops and whoever else is willing to volunteer to march to Moscow and overthrow the Ministry of Defense. So I guess Wagner is taking on the entire Russian military. Now, this seems pretty outlandish to me. For one thing, if Wagner was going to launch a coup, you would think that they would keep kind of tight-lipped about it until, they already did it. That's normally how you do a coup. Normally, the coup is a surprise, and then afterwards, the coup leader, once they think that they've, they've secured some modicum of power, they've overthrown and arrested who it is they're trying to get rid of, they then go on TV, or in Prigozhin's case, you go on Telegram, and you put out a statement and say, hey, I'm fully in control. There's been a coup. I'm in charge now. I am the captain now. That's normally the routine you go. You don't go on Telegram in advance and say, you know what, I think we're going to stage a coup. That doesn't work out well. That's not a coup. That's a declaration of war. Some people are calling that. Some people are saying that Prigozhin has declared war on the Russian Ministry of Defense. Now, interestingly enough, RT, which is Russian state media, it's not run by the Ministry of Defense. It's run by the Russian government more broadly. They are saying that Prigozhin is spreading misinformation. That's their top story. Which is interesting. They're being very tame. They're saying that Prigozhin is incorrect. They're not calling him a traitor. They're not saying that he is an insurrectionist. RT is saying that he's spreading misinformation. Now, there is definitely more to the story that we do not know. For one thing, if Prigozhin is this hostile towards any part of the Russian government, I know he said everything else is fine except the Ministry of Defense, that's all I want to change. If he's this hostile towards the Ministry of Defense, how does he have a contract, to work with the Ministry of Defense? And, even if you want to argue, well, Wagner's too big. Russia can't just have the war without Wagner. They need their soldiers. It's like, okay, why isn't, is it the SVB that is the Internal Security Service in Russia, or is it the GRU? I get them mixed up. I wish it was still just the KGB. That'd be easy. But it's, whatever it is, the SVB or the GRU. Why haven't they staged a coup inside Wagner? Wouldn't that be what you would expect first? Wouldn't you expect it to be the Russian government staging their own internal coup to get rid of Prigozhin and insert someone as the leader of Wagner who is in line with the Russian government? Isn't that what they'd want if Wagner is actually an important and powerful institution in Russia's broader military strategy? You wouldn't expect it to be Wagner openly launching the coup against the Ministry of Defense. That's hard to believe. So there's got to be more going on here. It can't just be what it seems. The Russian government, if Prigozhin is getting to this level where he's speaking this way publicly, they would have known for a very long time that Prigozhin was unstable and unreliable. In other words, he would be dead. Now, would it be entertaining if all of this was true and everything was as it appears to be? Yes, I think it would be interesting to watch a Russian civil war. Now, I'm not rooting for that, just like I wasn't rooting for there to be a Ukraine war. But it would be something interesting because there has not been a Russian civil war in my lifetime. There hasn't been one in over 100 years at this point, now that I think about it. But I just don't think that's the most likely explanation here. I think what's going on is this is some kind of psyop. Now, the simplest and least interesting explanation is that this is a psyop to distract from a potential Russian offensive. So, in other words, the Ruskies make it seem like, oh, you know, we're tearing each other apart, we're completely disunified, and Prigozhin outright says, I'm marching to Moscow with 25,000 men. All the Wagner guys, we're going to leave Ukraine behind, and we'll worry about Ukraine later. He's signaling that to the Ukrainian military. If they take him at his word, the last thing they'll be expecting is an offensive from the Ruskies, a united offensive between the Ministry of Defense and Wagner. And so they might let their guard down. They might even themselves try and go on the offensive and get more aggressive, too aggressive, take risks because they think that Russia is collapsing. Prigozhin could just be baiting them. I think that there's an argument that this is what he did with his last outburst in Bakhmut when he was talking about how the Ministry of Defense is, killing all these men and that we're about to lose Bakhmut. Well, guess what? A week later, Russia completely won Bakhmut. They were right on the cusp of winning that battle. And Prigozhin came out and said, "Oh my gosh, everything's falling apart." And then right after that, they won. So in hindsight, Prigozhin's last outburst looks to be more and more like it was a psyop of some kind. I don't know necessarily what the purpose was. I don't think that it changed the outcome. But in this case, we have to consider that. So something else that I saw raised by Russians with Attitudes podcast, their Twitter account, they suggested that maybe this is kind of partially true, and Prigozhin is rising up against the Ministry of Defense with Putin's blessing, because Putin can't fire Shoigu politically, and it's easier, if Prigozhin kind of creates this situation, and Prigozhin's the bad guy, and then, they can sort of move Shoigu out and put someone else in that position. I can't comment about that. I don't know enough about Russian internal politics. I don't know how strong Shoigu's position is within the Russian political matrix. I don't know how hard it would be for Putin to get rid of him, if Putin even would want to get rid of Shoigu. So I can't really comment on that. I'm just going off my gut here. I think there has to be a lot more than meets the eye as far as this case is concerned. But if we can take everything at face value and all this actually happens, it will be interesting to watch. It will be tragic because now we've watched Ukraine get destroyed for the last year and a half. Now we'll watch Russia get destroyed for who knows how long. But I don't see it happening. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.